The difficulty in firing, and how people, when they were fired, 40% of the people who were fired, it was wrong that they were doing a great job.
But didn't that also mean 60% of the people who were fired knew it was a reason they were fired? You see the problem here?
Recently on Twitter, on X, with Elon over DEI programs. What to you is the essence of the disagreement there?
I wouldn't call it a beef, right? It's
a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's fun for me, right? I just,
Hold up, I'm gonna restart it because it didn't show the intro, so you should be at 1:30. So 3, 2, 1.
You've had a beef recently on Twitter, on X, with Elon over DEI programs. What to you is the essence of the disagreement there?
I wouldn't call it a beef, right? It's
a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's fun for me, right? I just, it's his platform. He gets to run it any way he pleases. He pays for that right. And so I have total respect for whatever choices he makes, even if I don't agree with them. But because it's his platform, people are less likely to disagree with him, particularly somebody who's got a platform themselves. And so when we start talking about DEI and it's just de facto racist and this stuff that I just think is nonsense, I have no problem, sharing my opinion. And if he disagrees, okay, he can disagree. I don't care, and it's fun to engage, but he doesn't really engage. He just comes back with snark comments, which is, his choice.
Yeah, you in your comments. Well, you do a bit of snark too, but
yeah, a little bit.
But you're pretty, let's say, rigorous in your response. So there is some exchange of ideas. There's some snark. There's some fun, all that kind of stuff, and you do voice the opinion that represents a large number of people, and it's great. I mean, that's what's it's really beautiful. But just lingering on the topic, what to you is the good and the bad of DEI programs?
Really simple, right? D is diversity. And that means you just expand your pool of potential applicants to people who you might not otherwise have access to.
His definition of diversity is really good. However, the problem that people have with diversity is that not only are companies or maybe even universities expanding their applicant pool, they're not only expanding their applicant pool, but they're changing the requirements and they're changing the criteria of the applicants. What I mean is they would expand their applicant pool to, let's say, a different set of minorities, for example, in DEI. But then this applicant pool would have to have a lower standard, or I'm not even going to say lower, a different standard than the other applicant pool would have. That's why people inherently have a problem with DEI. And that's kind of where Elon Musk goes at. And if you don't know, Mark Cuban disagrees with Elon Musk. This is what this whole video is about. But let's get into it. I hope you enjoy it.
To look where you didn't look before, to look where other people aren't looking for quality employees. That's simple. And the E in equity means when you hire somebody, you put them in a position to succeed. The I, inclusion, is when you've hired somebody and they may not be typical, if you will, right? You show them some love and give them the support they need so they can do their job as best they can and feel comfortable and confident going to work. It's that simple.
So that's a beautiful ideal. When it's implemented poorly, perhaps, or in a way that doesn't reach that ideal, do you see, maybe when it's quota-based, do you see that it can result in essentially racism towards Asian people and white people, for example?
There's a lot to unpack there, right? So first, you can't do quotas. They're illegal unless you're, and I'm not the lawyer on this subject, but unless you're trying to repair something that's happened in the past, like some discrimination that's happened in the past. So it's not quota-based. And I think that's really just kind of a straw man that people put out there. Now, does that mean that there aren't DEI programs that are implemented poorly? Of course not. There are everything that's implemented poorly in one company to another, right? Sales, marketing.
The fact that Mark Cuban, being a billionaire NBA team owner, just is going to sit here and lie to our faces and say quotas are illegal or imply that quotas or racial quotas aren't happening is insane. We all know racial quotas happen. I don't even know why you're going to sit here and pretend like racial quotas is a thing of the past, or racial quotas just they're not happening. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, man. We all know it. We see it every day. Microsoft was just under fire. If you look at racial quotas, Microsoft, they were under fire because their DEI program, it's a racial quota program where you want a specific amount of minorities or whatever. They were under fire after the Supreme Court ruled affirmative action is unconstitutional. So you're just going to sit here and pretend like none of this stuff is happening? And this is not an attack on Mark Cuban, but you can't gaslight us, man. We know.
Human resources, you can pick any element of business and find companies that implement it poorly. But that's the beauty of capitalism in a free market, or mostly free market, where if you make these choices and they are the wrong choices, you're going to lose your best people. You're not going to be able to hire the best people. You're not going to execute on your business plans in the way that we discussed, regardless of the size of the company. And it also, I think, depends on where you're having the discussion. So when I'm in a different group of people off of X, the feedback's completely different, right? But to your question of reverse racism, yes, it happens. Because people are people. There's no human being that is 100% objective. And it's also, there's very, very, very few jobs that can be determined on a purely quantitative basis, right? How do you tell one janitor from the other? Who's the best, right? How do you tell one salesperson that you're hiring versus another you're hiring? Because they haven't sold your product yet. So you don't know. We talked earlier about firing people because you made mistakes. And, yes, there's discrimination against any group, white, Asian, black, green, orange, whatever it may be. But I truly believe that there's far more discrimination against people of color than there are people who are white. And I think it's become a straw man that reverse discrimination because of DEI is prevalent or near ubiquitous.
Well, much of American history was defined by intense radical racism and sexism.
Mm-hmm.
But in the recent years, there was a correction, and I think the nature of the criticism is that there's an overcorrection where DEI programs at universities and companies are often, when they're not doing their job well, are often hard to criticize, because when you criticize them within the company or so on, they have a very strong immune system where if you criticize a DEI program, it seems like it's very easy to be called racist, and if you're called racist or sexist, that's a sticky label.
So you're getting into the culture of organizations, right? And leadership within organizations, and accepting any type of criticism, put aside DEI. When I criticized the referees in the NBA, I got fined, right? That was their option. I knew what I was getting into, right?
And I'm happy he brought up the NBA, because the NBA is a perfect example of the point that he's missing. When you have an NBA team, or when you're constructing a sports team in general, race is not necessarily, race doesn't matter. You want the best players. You don't care what race they are. You don't care where they're from. Yeah, your best player, Luka Doncic, he's not even from America. I don't know. I don't know where he's from. I'm not even going to speculate. But that's the point. When you're making a team, you want the best players. You've done it. So how is this different from companies going out of their way to have racial quotas? The reason why I think it's a problem necessarily with racial quotas is because no matter what, you're going to try to hire a specific number of a color of people. That automatically negates having the best. It automatically does it, because if you look at a sports team, they don't care what race you are. They don't even care where you're from. They don't care about your past. Can you get the ball in the basketball hoop? You've done it. So why are you trying to basically imply that, oh, it's not a problem. I don't do it personally, but when other people do it, it's not a problem? Because, come on, Mark Cuban. Come on, man.
Not that they're completely analogous, but it's cause and effect. If I'm in a major company and I'm publicly criticizing or even internally criticizing a sales plan or a product, our product sucks, right? Or like there was a Google engineer that got fired for saying, Google had AGI, right? And nobody believed they did, and they knew that created problems. It wasn't DEI related, but it was, saying something publicly that was in the CEO's eyes to the detriment of the company, right? So I think those are all analogous. If you're trying to accomplish something within an organization because you think there's a problem and there's people speaking out saying, look, we're getting it wrong. I think I'm a victim of all this, and the company, right? Then leadership has got to make a decision. Do they agree or not agree? Are they right or are they wrong? Is it to the positive? Is it positive or negative to the company? And you decide. So this conversation that conservatives are being silenced in organizations now. I haven't seen it. I've talked to, and then the other side of your question, I think unpacking it is, what's driving all this? Put aside universities for one. In corporate America, when I talk to people in corporate America about DEI, they always start talking about ideology, right? And like I've talked to Bill Ackman, who you've had on, right? And when I asked him, well, Bill, you run your own companies. Who's telling you what to do? They are. Who's they? Well, it's the universities, the people who have this ideology of DEI. I'm like, did they force you? Did they coerce you? Did you lose control of your company? No, it's not me. It happens to other people. Then I talk to other people. Same thing. So I get, I try not to go one-on-one in Twitter conversations on this topic. So in the DMs, I'll talk to people who are really conservative, and I'll ask the same question. And be like, well, who's forcing you to do this? Well, it's the ideology that's everywhere. You see it. Didn't you see the Harvard thing, in University of North Carolina? I'm like, I've never had anybody try to push me in this direction to do this.
Okay, I'll answer your question. The people who are forcing you are your family, your friends, the people who isolate you if you have certain beliefs. It's companies who run social media searches and may not hire you if you're more conservative. Or I'd even argue a different one. If you're more liberal, for example. The people who are forcing these companies are the universities who may not allow them to recruit their students on campus unless they hire a specific race of student. You don't think this stuff happens? We have to talk about the real world. Or maybe it's the banks who refuse to manage the money of corporations unless they have certain racial quotas. Mark Cuban, let's be honest here. Let's be honest. The fact that you're trying to take the approach as if you're trying to gaslight the public into believing that this stuff just doesn't happen, is not real. It's a very interesting approach to me because I 100% believe that you're smart enough to just defend the fact that you have liberal beliefs. Just defend it. Say, yeah, this stuff happens, but the reason it happens is because of this. Maybe it's because of a history of racism in America, or maybe it's because of a history of economic isolation of a certain community. You could argue that. Whether or not someone agrees or disagrees with you is one thing, but you can argue that. But the fact that you're trying to basically imply, oh, I don't think this stuff happens in real life. The conservatives I talk to can't prove it. They say it doesn't happen to them. The other billionaire CEOs I talk to can't say it happens to them, even though I'm on a podcast exposing. Come on, man. We're not stupid. We see it happen. Come on.
This was my business choice. I'm not trying to tell other people you have to do this. You make your own business choices. And so where companies have made their business choices, and if somebody doesn't feel confident or comfortable with it, they may feel they're being discriminated against. There was something I just read in the Wall Street Journal where the Wall Street Journal had a company interview 2 million people, right? And the difficulty in firing and how people, when they were fired, 40% of the people who were fired felt like it was wrong that they were doing a great job.
But didn't that also mean 60% of the people who were fired knew it was a reason they were fired? You see the problem here? You're trying to basically imply that, well, 40% of the people believe something happened despite that not being the real reason. Yeah, you may have a point, but this also implies the other 60%, or even if 10% were ineligible for the study, the other 50% knew it was a reason. So the majority knew it was a reason why they got fired. So what he's going to try to do is say, well, majority of people are basically delusional on why they're getting fired. They're delusional on why they're not getting hired, even though we can look in public and see it happening in real time. You're trying to gaslight us into believing that this stuff is not real, and I'm not going to let it happen. I'm sorry. I'm not going to let it happen. But if you like videos like this, comment down for a part 2. It's LFR Jojo, and I'll see you guys later.